This next ad comes to you from a company that's cooking the best omelets you'll have all year, all while changing the world one egg at a time. It's called Just Egg, and I'm happy to tell you about it because Just Egg is a cholesterol-free, plant-based egg that will give you the most decadent quiches of your life, the fluffiest scrambles, and the easiest egg sandwiches. Or in my case in particular, I love a good Just Egg scramble in the morning on an English muffin, a little bit of cheese and beautiful barbecue sauce. I think it's fantastic and it tastes great. And Just Egg has about the same protein as a chicken egg, but with much less saturated fat. Plus, Just Egg is packed with cholesterol-lowering polyunsaturated fat. Chicken eggs have severe FOMO when they look at Just Egg, and that's really the important part for me. In order for Just Egg to be successful, I think it really needs to make sure that it tastes good and is good for you, and I can happily say it ticks both of those boxes. As someone who loves eating eggs every morning, I've had to cut it back in recent years, basically because of health concerns. There's a lot of cholesterol in regular eggs, but I'm excited to have found an alternative that is good for me and good for the environment. In 2022, may your eggs be filled with Just Egg. Just Egg, really good eggs.
Lights out and away we ayo. Welcome to No Breaks, a Formula One podcast from the No Dunks Inc. StreamYard, proudly part of the Athletic Podcast Network. I'm your host, Trey Kirby. We've got our local F1 expert, Graydon Gordian, here in the yard with us. Graydon, what's up?
What's up, Speed Demons? How you guys doing?
We've got our Sterling reserve driver, Andrew, in the background checking lap times there in NASCAR land. And we're very excited to introduce our special guest today, one of the biggest petrol heads I know, Leigh. You're going to hit us with the friends on this one?
I'm not sure. Rev heads or petrol heads or something like that, I think is more appropriate for this show.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions later on. I've heard you call race fans both petrol heads and rev heads. Is there a difference, or is this just like an updated sort of terminology here since we got hybrid engines?
Well, I would say a petrol head is more your NASCAR sort of fan, and a rev head is more your Formula One fan. That's the way I would go about it. I mean, they both use revs, of course, but I just think there's more sort of throttle, more sort of like beefiness to the NASCAR where the petrol is, whereas the more svelte design of the Formula One car are just more your rev head. That's how I would determine the difference anyway.
I think that makes total sense, and we're off to a banger start because we've got a lot of rev heads here joining us live in the Slipstream team on the new YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us. If you're listening to the podcast a little bit later, thank you very much as well. Leah, we're already talking rev heads and petrol heads, but I got to know, first question we ask everybody, are you a pumpernickel head? You like pumpernickel toast?
Where are we at?
Yeah, I would say if it's toasted with some butter and a cup of tea on the side, yeah, I would say so. I like a bit of variety, a bit of sweet and spice in my afternoon snack. So yeah, put me down for
you're having pumpernickel in the afternoon. This isn't a breakfast.
No, I'm thinking probably more at my grandma's house where I would have had something like that in my afternoon tea. My grandma was a very, very particular lady. She liked things done a certain way, and she was, so the afternoon routine, the cup of tea routine. I can just see her coming out with the tray now, the pot of tea, and then just a few slices of warm toasted pumpernickel bread. So that's I would definitely be in for that.
This is our biggest endorsement of pumpernickel.
This is you're the most pro pumpernickel of anyone so far. I think we're 3-2 on the season for pumpernickel, which is tally. But to the end, where are we at by the end? But yeah, that was our biggest pro pumpernickel.
Yeah, you're definitely the biggest pumpernickel backer, the biggest pumpernickel pumper so far. Would you put Vegemite on pumpernickel, or is that ridiculous?
Oh no, certainly not. No, Vegemite is only on plain white toast. That's the only, or plain white bread, I should say. You can have it as a sandwich, but only on toast. I do not think the yeasty sort of taste of Vegemite would do well with the pumpernickel. No, Vegemite. I understand people around the world very skeptical to try it. If you get the right conditions and the right circumstances, I think you'll change your mind. My wife, who's from Peru, when we were in Australia a couple of years ago, she was actually like, this is actually not too bad because it was served under the right conditions. So, but people think with Vegemite, I'm just going to hand you a jar and you got to dig it out with like a spoon and just eat it like that. I mean, that's gross. But on toast, warm, buttery toast, it's actually quite good, especially in winter.
Conditions have to be perfect. So honestly, I'm kind of glad we're here in the StreamYard rather than the Classic Factory, because I would have made you bring in Vegemite and we would have tried it on pumpernickel toast. I might have had to change my vote to anti-pumpernickel, but we knew this was going to be the perfect time to have you on. Not only are we talking about the Grand Prix down in Australia over the weekend, you've been on vacation this past week, Leigh, and you had the need for speed. Saw this on your Instagram, cruising through the sands of Aruba. What would you call this? Like a sail car? What is this thing?
It's called blow karting, and it's actually incredibly fun and exciting because there are no brakes on these things, and Aruba is a very, very windy island. Now, where we were staying was windy, and I jumped in the van. We drove about 25 minutes to the most windy part of the island. And the guys, like, when they're saying, listen, guys, before anyone goes on, just want you to know there's no brakes on these things, okay? So if you're driving and you feel like you're out of control, you have to steer into the, like, grassy area. That's the only way you're going to slow down. Like, let go of the rope, because you have a rope to sort of help control the speed somewhat, but that's only like from going from fast to super fast, but let go of it and steer off course like that. And it was, like the first couple of laps you're going around and a howling gale just picks up the sail there and you're off and you're like, I am not in control at all here. And, you start turning. And in fact, I actually rolled it at one point because I went around a corner far too fast. And the wind gust sort of picked me up because I was like out of alignment there, and it threw me down. I've got a bit of you can't really see it anymore. The ocean water sort of cleaned it up, but there's a bit of a bruise there on my thing, because the other thing the guy said was, if you do tip it, don't put your arm out, because that's a lot of weight going onto your arm. You could break it, but in the moment you're tipping, you're like, well, the natural thing to do is put your hand down there. So fortunately, the sort of top of the sail hit the ground before like I did and my body did, but it was so much fun. I took Sebastian around for a couple of laps too, because I had a little the dual carriage there that he was after. I was like, nah, I'm not feeling this. And I was like, okay, you tried it. That's fine. You don't need to come around again. But I went round probably, 40 or 50 times, because once you feel comfortable, then you start really ripping into those corners, and it's a ton of fun.
That's almost like a full Grand Prix, 50 laps.
Yeah. I mean, they're pretty small laps, to be fair, but there was 3 other people on this trip, and I was like, I mean, I don't want to sound like a jerk, but I want to race. I mean, you got to race these guys.
Yeah. I get it.
But it was a little compact for a 4-way race there. Like you can probably sort of see there on the video there, maybe 2 of them together, but you can't really sort of squeeze out 4 guys like that. So we didn't race, but there was definitely a part of me that was like, I just want to see if I'm the best out of us 4. At 4 complete strangers, I want to know if I'm the fastest.
Well, I don't blame you. And I'm glad to hear you talking about, the potential dangers, because you sent me the extended cut of this. And there definitely is a part here where you nearly went off, wanted to give the peace sign to the camera, but just a little.
I mean, that's the thing is I started
both hands on the wheel. This is a both hands
I started
on the wheel
showboating because I'm like, I'm in control here. And as soon as I let go of it, it's like, I mean, it would have been hilarious if you had seen me like stack it there in that spot, because it would have been, I got what I deserved. But it was a really, really fun activity to do. And, I'll be doing it again somewhere for sure.
It looked like a ton of fun, and it looked like you were having a ton of fun. And it looks like, yeah, exactly. Riven is completely right here. No breaks in the Windy City. It's just perfect. So that's why we had to have you on. So we'll see you later, Leigh. And Leigh and Graydon and I will start talking about, we're kidding. We wanted to talk a lot about the Australian Grand Prix, which we will get to. But Leigh, we also want to just talk to you because you've actually been to the Australian Grand Prix. And I think you mentioned on No Dunks that you've even driven on the circuit when it's not in when it is not in use because it is a street circuit. What are your experiences like at the Australian Grand Prix?
Yeah, if you say you've driven on a Formula One circuit, it sounds like you're on one of those super, dedicated tracks. But this is basically just like driving through any other city. And for I think it's about 3 months before the race, they start sort of closing off parts of the road because they've got to smooth it out. It's got to be perfectly smooth for the race. You can't have normal sort of like potholes like you might when you're dropping the kids off to school and hope the drivers can get around them. So it actually, for people who live around there, I don't think they really like it because it does interrupt so much of their daily sort of traffic use prior to the Grand Prix. After that, it's pretty much back to normal, but it's pretty hectic. But it's really not anything special other than just driving on a normal road there. So unfortunately, there's no great story for me driving around it and doing anything crazy. But I know, again, in the months leading up to the Grand Prix, especially in the early days when we first got it from Adelaide back in 1996, every young male, and I was like 20 years old at the time, we were all there in our cars like, all right, I'm Michael Schumacher. I'm going around this track. And the cops used to have a high uptick in speeding and traffic infringements because, people just sort of think like anytime something happens, people just think, oh, I can do that. I can be a Formula One driver. And so, it's great. I mean, it was great for the city of Melbourne because it sort of came out of nowhere. It was Adelaide's race from when I was a kid, from in the early 80s until around the mid 90s. And it was always the last race of the season. It was a big international event to have in Australia. And the fact that it was in Adelaide was huge. Usually, well, I guess Formula One doesn't always have their race in the capital city of a country, but you certainly would have it in the second biggest city of the country. And Adelaide's, third or fourth at best. So it was really good that they had it. And then the Victorian government, the state of Victoria, kind of just stole it off them. I remember it sort of was rumored there for a while, and then it seemed to happen very quickly that all of a sudden, hey, we're getting the Grand Prix in Melbourne in 1996. And that really upset a lot of people from South Australia and Adelaide because there's a rivalry anyway between the two states and the two cities. And then Melbourne sort of comes along as a big brother and just said, nah, we'll take this now. And they've had it ever since. So, it was great because, again, as you know, certainly, Trey, anything that happens in Australia, and particularly in Melbourne, we love to flex our muscles and say, look, we're the biggest city in Australia because we have the Australian Open tennis, the Australian rules football grand final is there. We had the Australia versus USA 2 games in Melbourne only a few years ago. Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey fought in Melbourne. So there's always been huge events. So when we got the Grand Prix, it was almost like a lot of Melbourne, they weren't even really big Formula One races, but it's like, we just want the biggest event because it's the biggest event and we're just going to take it. And so they did. So, and I think, when you look at the crowd numbers, I'm not sure. I know we were talking about it on yesterday's show there briefly, Trey. They may have broken the record in this most recent race here in Melbourne, but I think prior to that, Adelaide still held the record for the entire weekend of the race in terms of total crowd number. So it just shows how huge it was supported there in Adelaide. And when Melbourne got it, it wasn't like, all of a sudden we're blowing away their numbers. It was kind of like, yeah, we've got it, but we're not going to go. We just want to have it just because we want to have it.
You mentioned, Australia is a terrific sporting nation, right? Like huge sports fans, lots of their own sports that like homegrown stuff. How big is F1 there compared to other things? Is it the biggest motorsport there? Is it the biggest racing series? Are there others that compete with it?
Yeah, within Australia, probably not, because they have the Auscars or the NASCARs, which has always been, you've got General Motors, which is Holden in Australia versus Ford, and they've always kind of battled, and they've had the sort of within Australia race that's always had big rivalries between the two. You're either a Ford guy or you're a Holden guy, and there's no sort of in between. You can never switch teams either. So that was always huge, and those races were just all throughout Australia. And also the motorbikes, actually, I think it was the super bikes or the 500 cc's. That was always huge. They had a race down there in Melbourne as well. And I'm trying to think of who the Australian. Well, we had Mick Doohan. I don't know if you guys have heard of Mick Doohan. He was a 5-time world champion, and Wayne Gardner won it a couple of times as well. So motorbikes, petrol racing, it's all been huge. So Melbourne getting the Grand Prix was kind of like the icing on the cake when we originally got it. And I remember the build up to the first race, sort of 96, where it's like, oh, Formula One's coming to Melbourne. So, it's those glamorous people from the world, the big, rich, famous motor racing teams and all the glamorous girls and all that. And I remember we got tickets to a party, Formula One party in Melbourne. It was like $80 for a ticket. This is, again, when I was only 20. I didn't have that sort of money, but it was like, you got to go to the Formula One. We got there and there's a few posters on the wall, like Formula One in Melbourne. Drinks were like $8 a bottle. And you're like, but there's nothing actually, there's no one from Formula One here, no one from the teams here. It was just basically just gouging Victorians and Melburnians for their money. And it worked. But I think as well, I think a part of that was, some Melburnians were like, we're just getting completely ripped off. This is not really helping the general public. It's just the big corporate event here. And it's the big glamour event that people love to brag about, but it's not necessarily all that much fun for the general public and the schleps like me and my friends.
Well, speaking of your friends, I know you were early to the NBA amongst your friends with the 1987 All-Star Game. Were there a lot of rev heads in your crew there in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I think the Formula One, because it was the last race of the season in Adelaide, I remember the 1986 race where Nigel Mansell blew a tire when he was sort of close to finishing, I think winning the world championship, and then Kiki Rosberg did the same thing, and it was one of those things where the biggest race of the season came down to that last race and guys are blowing out their tires. And so it was sort of action because a lot of people, I think, are like, it's hard to follow the sport unless you are really into it. It's hard for a casual to sort of jump on and understand who's winning, what the stakes are, what it means and the whole thing. But that race in particular, seeing those tires blow out, I'm sure you guys have seen it because it was a pretty historic moment there where Mansell's driving down the straight and boom, his tire just explodes like that. And I think, I believe Kiki Rosberg actually won the world championship on that race. So we were kind of into it, but only really when it came to Adelaide, because it was the last race of the season. Not a lot of people followed it because most of the races are in the Northern Hemisphere and Europe. And so for us, that's wintertime where we're into Australian rules football and basketball and other things. And not having an Australian race also kind of made it harder to follow. So it was more just that end of year celebration of the event rather than following the whole season.
You mentioned it was a big party when you went and everybody was gouging you on drinks. Daniel Ricciardo is obviously famous for doing a shoey anytime he wins. Yeah. You ever do a shoey, Leigh?
No, I've never done it.
No?
I know.
You've never done a shoey?
I know. A few.
I've done a shoey. I figured you would have done a shoey.
Yeah, no. I mean, a few people have sort of said as a pick and payoff one time to do a shoey and that, but I think you've done one, haven't you, Trey, on the old starters? Didn't you do that one time you were drunk?
Yeah. I don't think it was pitched as a shoey. It was just a whole bunch of I just ended up covered in food at the end of 30 minutes, and part of it was drinking out of Matt Bonner's shoe. I guess I have done a shoe. You got to pull that clip
of the three of us, you're the only one that hasn't done a shoe. I can't believe that.
That's pretty crazy.
I know. I'll have to correct that at some point.
That would be the stakes for a little game we have coming up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's funny you mentioned Aussie Rules Football League, because that was one of the things I did want to ask you about eventually, because we saw before racing actually got underway here in Australia over the weekend, we saw some action on Twitter. Valtteri Bottas meeting up with the Richmond FC squad there. Bottas, I'm sure you can notice here, is the smallest of the four gentlemen there. I got to have some fun with Richmond FC. Here he is doing a kick. Mm-hmm. Here he is doing one of those punch pass things. And my favorite picture, Bottas at the top of a scrum, smiling ear to ear as he catches the Aussie Rules football. Yeah. What do you think, Leigh? When Valtteri's finally done racing, you think he's got a future playing Aussie Rules football?
Maybe not. I think maybe as a jockey, because as jockeys like Formula One drivers, it's better when you're smaller and more compact. You can't be too heavy when you're going around in a vehicle like that. But it is always hilarious. That's another thing when any major international event comes to Australia, and especially Victoria, we get the Australian Rules football out and just see what guys can do. I did that with Tim Hardaway during the Australia versus USA games, and same sort of thing. They look at the ball and they're like, I don't know, how am I supposed to hold this, and how am I supposed, the handball is very, very difficult concept for most people who have not grown up with it to grasp straight away. He looks more like a ballerina, Bottas, because those two hands, your two hands should basically be right together in this pose rather than completely separate like that. So it's a little bit tough. But this also does remind me, like Michael Schumacher, when he came, they always had basically almost like a I think it was more the drivers and sort of some famous sports people from Australia play a pickup game of soccer while I was there. Schumacher was always a big soccer head. So he loved to get out and show that he could do more than just be a race car driver because, he wasn't the most loved driver certainly by his peers and even by the fans, but he absolutely loved to just get out and show how multi-skilled he was in other sports. And that was another sort of one of those big celebration events. It was like, let's see what these guys can do outside of driving. And I'm pretty sure I remember Schumacher being pretty decent at soccer. So, I don't remember him doing the Aussie rules. Maybe that was one of those things. He's like, there's no way you're going to embarrass me by giving me Aussie rules before.
Fun fact, I think in the off season, Valtteri actually spends a lot of time in Australia because his girlfriend is Australian. She's Tiffany Cromwell, right. The professional Australian road cyclist, actually.
Wow.
So he's down there a lot, and he's a huge coffee head. Valtteri is obsessed with coffee. And my understanding is Melbourne is like one of the epicenters of global coffee culture. So
you're talking to a big coffee head here, Graydon. At least the Valtteri Bottas of no doubt, no doubt.
So I think he loves going there because he was a judge in the World Coffee Championships and all these things. He's like really into it. So he loves going to Australia because there he can nerd out with a bunch of other coffee people.
It's funny you say that because again, when I was there last year, 3 years ago, and I went to a football game on a Friday night, and Friday night Australian rules football is like Monday night NFL football. It's like, that's the night you want to play. It's the biggest night. And I went to the MCG. Now, when I used to go as a kid, it was hot dogs, French fries, and beer. Everyone drinks beer. I couldn't believe I was at the MCG. There was probably 80,000 people there. The lineups and the amount of coffee stands in the MCG now is like, people were like 50 rows or 50 people back to try to get their coffee for a game of footy. I was like, what has happened here in Melbourne? This is unbelievable. Like, no one would go to the footy in the 80s or 90s and drink coffee. It was like beer or nothing, and now it's like, God, I thought I was the only pretentious one in Melbourne, but maybe it's a thing, It's like, we're all actually really pretentious and coffee snobs. I just didn't realize, like, being away from the country for so long, that I was still growing with the Melbourne sort of mindset of like, no, we're coffee drinkers now. So it was wild to see. I can't remember seeing that ever as a kid. I can never remember my dad saying, like, I'm going to get a meat pie. Anyone want a coffee? Like, it didn't happen,
Now you spend half an hour tamping and brewing every single morning. Other thing I want to ask you about, Leigh. During qualifying, we saw a lot of magpies hanging out like around the turns. And I think it was Brundle was like, you got to be careful around those magpies. How dangerous are they?
Yeah, well, this time of year, you're probably safe because they're not breeding right now. So they are extremely territorial. It's usually around August and September time when they breed, and that's when they become vicious. But the crazy thing about magpies as well is they are also extremely protective and loyal. So my dad, he gets tons of magpies in his backyard, and he and his partner actually feed them, especially again during breeding time because they need so much food for their kids. And it's like mince meat, what they feed them for the baby birds. And so these magpies will come literally up to the door, even peck on the window sometimes to say, hey, where's our food? And we would go out, they would go out there and feed them. When we were there, like my 2-year-old at the time, Oscar, he was out there feeding them as well. And so the magpies will not swoop in that area, my dad, at all. Like, he is as safe as anything. But if one of you guys was to turn up there, there's a good chance they would swoop you in August, September time, because they're so protective of that area. And I mean, you could come on their right side by feeding them. If they see you're a feeder, then you're in the clear. But otherwise, you got to watch out. And my dad, I remember once as a kid, he got swooped one time and had a huge gash on the back of his head because he was not running near his house. He was out, 5 kilometers away from home. And some of those magpies are just vicious. So this time of year, though, like I say, you'd be pretty safe. I would think they're not going to swoop. You might get the odd crazy one, but for the most part, when it's not breeding season, they're not usually swooping. But yeah, they're a tough bird, man. They really are.
They're a
tough bird.
That's a tough bird right there. I thought the grackles in Austin were tough, but it sounds like they're no match for these magpies.
Yeah.
If they ain't breeding, they ain't swooping. I didn't expect to get a magpie scouting report, but I am a little nervous. You're always saying we're going to go to Australia some off season. We're going to go for a World Cup or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be during August and September. We would definitely go to visit your dad.
Yeah.
We're getting swooped in the backyard, guaranteed.
Well, again, we'll give you the mincemeat, and you'll be fine. You'll that'll be the clearance. But again, that's only in our backyard. So anytime you go anywhere else, you got to watch it. In fact, I'll share a video with you guys after the show about a friend of mine where she's basically saying to the magpie, like, "Get out of here!" And the magpie's like coming up from behind because she's like, the magpie's going to attack you, but if they see your eyes, if they're coming in for a swoop, you're supposed to look at them, because if they see your eyes, they turn away. But they come in so stealthily and they come from behind as well, so you won't actually know they're coming until sometimes you just feel it or hear their beak snap at you as they're trying to scare you off. It's wild, man.
I have a question. Snakes, crocodiles, sharks, magpies, kangaroos. Is any animal in Australia not out to get you? I feel like it is just every living. Is there any creature in Australia that when it wanders into your yard, it's like a white-tailed deer? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's nice, that's
Cute.
sweet, it's here, like cute. Everything seems like it's there to harm you.
Yeah, I think like the marsupials, like a wombat, they're probably pretty safe. They're not going to harm you. They're trying to get out of your way. But it is funny, since again I've moved out of Australia, and you look at the reputation it has, and then even when I have returned, there are a couple of times I'm like, yeah, there could be snakes in the grass here. I mean, it's scary. And one time I was at a friend's house, and they had like an outdoor like room and a house. And under the toilet seat, there was the redback spider. Redback spiders are tiny. You can tell they've got this little red like mark on their abdomen there. They're tiny, but they can deliver a lethal venom shot to you as well. And there's a couple of times I'm like, this is crazy. This spider is so small. You can't see it. It hides under the toilet. So you sit down and it could inject you with enough poison that I think it can kill you. I mean, I think you'd have to be unlucky, but it's like, imagine that. You just go to the can, and someone just decides, that's it. You've had enough. You're out of here.
Well, if you get bit by a spider when you're on the toilet, you're already unlucky in my book. But it did feel like everything was out to get these drivers, because heading into Q3, we heard a bunch of drivers on the radios asking their pits, I need the darkest visor I can possibly get, because the sun was like glaring in everybody's eyes. So my question for you, Leigh, just how beautiful is a sunset in Melbourne?
Yeah, it's right near Port Phillip Bay there. So it is actually pretty nice, I have to say. The sun sort of, where is it? I'm trying to think. It doesn't really work for this situation. But yeah, if you get a nice, particularly March, April, this is coming out of summer. We're going into sort of, autumn, as we call it, and winter time soon. So you can still get some very, very nice weather. The shorter days, they're starting to come in as well. Daylight saving has ended there. So yeah, driving, they drive about 2:00 in the afternoon, I think the race is, and it finishes at, a couple of hours later. So yeah, you can definitely see that traffic can cause some trouble for the drivers there, because it certainly caused a lot of trouble for the drivers who are coming home from school and work, into the city area there of Melbourne. Yeah. So it is funny when you can sort of understand what the drivers think, and for them having to deal with so many different conditions in all these cities and countries, it's another challenge that it's very hard to prepare for that. Other than the whole weekend you're there, you can't really sort of go somewhere else and really prepare for it, because you just don't know how the sun is going to affect your position in the race and where you're driving at what time of the day. So, but it's, I don't really get homesick for Australia anymore. My life has moved on from there, and, my family and everything's here, but it is still cool when I see that track, and it's a beautiful track. It's around the lake there, Albert Park Lake. And a lot of people didn't like it at the start because they were like, you're polluting the city there. But it is still, I think, and I am biased being from Melbourne, but I do think it is one of the nicest settings for a Formula One race. I think it just adds a little bit being, driving around a beautiful part of Melbourne.
You actually don't have, you were right earlier when you were talking about what a big city Melbourne is, that, a surprisingly few of the races take place in huge cities. I guess like with them as the backdrop. I guess Singapore does as a notable one, but a lot of them, and I guess some of the Middle East races, you can see the city around them, but a lot of them, France, the various races held in Italy, the ones that we've had in Germany over the years, Silverstone, Austin, Austin's not the backdrop for it. In Austin's, while a larger city it used to be, not, not in the top 10 in the United States, right? So it's interesting. It is one where it's cool to see the whole cityscape there and how close Albert Park is to the downtown. It is beautiful. I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, like Montreal, for example, obviously not the Canadian capital there. Sao Paulo, is it still Sao Paulo they race? I think.
Yeah, but it's Interlagos is like, Interlagos is like out, is outside
right.
of the city. You can't see it, really. So it's cool.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I guess a lot of those old European cities are just, so congested they can't drive around the city as well. They have to have like a designated track because, those cities aren't big enough even sometimes for their own cars. So to try to get a Formula One race, and again, like it is in Melbourne, you have to close the circuit off for so far in advance to get it ready for the race.
Yeah, totally. The one that probably stands out is probably most iconic is Monaco, right? Is the one you actually drive through the city. Baku, you drive through the city too, I guess. But it's I don't know. I love it. I agree with you. I think it's a really beautiful place to host a race. So.
Well, we're getting a new city race in not too long. We'll talk a little bit about the Las Vegas Grand Prix later. But Leigh, I kind of got to stop you here because you've been spoiling something that we've been planning here in the background. We know you love trivia. So Graydon came up with a bunch of Australian-themed Formula One trivia questions that he's going to be asking you. I was telling him, Leigh's going to be good at this. Leigh's going to know some of these answers for sure. And you've been saying the answers just like in casual, off the top of your head sort of information dropping here. So, Graydon, let's see what Leigh's got.
Okay, there's 12 points up for grabs here. We'll see how many you can get. We'll see if we can go all 12 for 12. It's really 3 questions. So we can do some bonus parts. So this first question is, there have been 17 Australian F1 drivers. 4 of those drivers have won races, and 2 of them went on to become world champions. What are the names of the 4 drivers that have won a Grand Prix? And then which 2 of those are Formula One drivers champions?
Well, I mean, Webber and Ricciardo, the only 2 I can think of. That
is 2 correct, but those I'll give you here. Those are the 2. Neither of them are world champions.
Exactly. Yeah, they haven't won. God, thinking of the other 2. I mean, I should know this, but I'm guessing it's like from the 60s.
One is from the 60s.
Yeah,
he's a very famous Australian motorsports figure. He went on to be involved in F1 in other capacities.
Michael Massey.
And final hint on this one, and then I'll say finally, he is the only driver to, I believe, win a race for the team where he was the owner of the team. The team bore his name when he drove.
It's not. Is his name Ian?
No, it's not.
No.
Don't look at the slipstream. Don't let their somebody's got it. Somebody's got it.
I'm not looking. I don't want to cheat. I should know this, but I really don't.
Okay, I'll give you this. Okay, so this one's Jack Brabham.
Oh, Jack Brabham.
Yeah, who was the champion in 59, 60, and 66, and the other. Okay, I'll give you the year. See if you can do it, which is 1980. Do you know who the winner was in 1980?
I have to admit, I
saw a picture on Twitter today. You must have been like 4 or 5 years old, saying you were a big rev head.
It's Alan Jones.
Oh my god!
Jonesy.
I think you do. Yeah.
Now you say them, and they're so obvious to me. But I was like,
okay.
Oh my god, Jack Brabham. Yeah, my god, Alan Jones. Yeah, that's bad.
So last one here. If this one was a tough one for this next one. This is a bonus question. I would have never gotten this, so there's no hard feelings. So oddly enough, of the 17 F1 drivers, those 4 have won races, and those 2 guys have won a title. But only one other Australian driver has ever even scored a championship point. The 12 of them never even scored a point in their careers. Only one guy. Do you know that person's name?
What year are we talking there?
70s, early 70s. To be honest,
I mean, that's the thing. We haven't got a rich history, recent history anyway, of drivers. Before
Tim
Webber.
Schenken. It's Tim Schenken. That's okay. I honestly was like only even vaguely aware of the existence of this guy. I would have never gotten this correct. So no hard feelings. Okay, so we've got 2 points, 2 points out of those there.
Okay.
Okay, this is a two-part question. I'm making it harder because I feel like I'm making this question harder than it started because I'm worried you're going to get it. So it's so 2 drivers are tied for the most Aussie GP wins.
Right.
There's 3 points available here. So first of all, how many wins is that? And then who are the 2 drivers that have achieved that number of wins? I will give you. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure Schumacher. I mean, he won it. How many times did Michael Schumacher win it?
Schumacher is correct. Schumacher is correct.
Now, how many times he would have won it? I mean, his prime years there from 2000 to 2004 or 5, he must have won a minimum 3 times. I know Eddie Irvine won in 99. I remember that because Eddie's probably my favorite driver to have because he was Ferrari's second in command that year and he nearly won it because Schumacher broke his leg. So I'm going to say Schumacher won it at least 3, maybe 4 times. And then I would say someone like it's Prost.
This other one is hard. He is a pre-F1 era Aussie GP. I almost didn't include it because this person is from before the Australian GP was technically part of the F1 calendar.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Very hard.
No, Jackie Stewart.
No, that's a good guess though. Jackie Stewart did race it, I believe.
I mean, someone from that era, Sterling Moss.
Again, a good guess. No, I'll give it to you. It's Lex Davison.
Oh,
who's an Australian driver who is
wow.
Okay, but it is 4, and it is Michael Schumacher. It is 4. A number of guys had 3. Jack Brabham, Alan Prost, Jenson Button, Sebastian Vettel had all won it 3 times. Okay. A lot of guys have won it 3 times, but Schumacher was the only guy with 4. Okay. And then last but not least here, you didn't say it exactly, but you're in the ballpark. You definitely kind of, I think you can get this. You can get this. First of all, what year was the first year that the Australian GP was on the calendar? As we discussed, it was in Adelaide. What year was that? And who was the winner of that race?
I'm pretty sure it was 85 when they first got it.
That is correct.
Who would have won that? I mean, Alan Prost is there. Mansell would have been racing then. Senna. I mean, Kiki Rosberg, I don't think. I'm going to say I'm going to play it fairly safe and pick one of those big. I'll say Mansell because I think Mansell actually had a pretty good record overall in Australia. And he was in the mid 80s. He was pretty good. So I'll take Nigel Mansell in 85.
Okay, it was 85, but it was KK Rosberg.
Oh,
so,
wow.
There was good. Okay, and then here, last bonus question on this one. That was the final race of a F1 legend, a true F1 legend's final race. Whose final race was that 1985 Aussie GP? This is definitely somebody you know.
Gerhard Berger.
That's a good guess. No, Niki Lauda.
Oh, Niki Lauda. Right, yeah. He had his own team.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was, fun fact about Niki Lauda, at one point he was winning the race. He actually was in the lead in his final race, but he ended up crashing into a wall at some point and not finishing in his final race, sadly.
Right.
So, that was pretty good.
I'm
old
impressed.
F1 trivia. That was pretty good. I'm definitely. So
yeah, I love to have guests on this show because it just knocks me further and further down the rankings of knowing about Formula One. I'm Nicholas Latifi at this point, dragging around the end. Leigh, I don't actually know how many points you got, but it feels like you got 5 points.
5 or 6, I think.
Yeah, seems like a solid performance to me.
Yeah,
pretty good.
I mean, I'm disappointed I didn't get Alan Jones. That's a bad one there. But
I was bullish on you on the first one. I figured I thought that was, but once I realized that Schumacher was an answer, I was like, I should have never done a question in which Michael Schumacher's an answer. You're just gonna get it. Yeah. It's too easy, So.
I mean, Schumi, he was great. Like, I mean, to me, he's like Tiger Woods, where not the most loved athlete, but just ruthlessly competitive to the point where, I mean, I think it was Adelaide in 94. I'm pretty sure it was, where he basically ran Damon Hill off the road. He just, in the final race, he was just like, well, whoops, I'm accidentally going to, sideswipe the other guy who can win this race. And it ended up knocking Schumacher out. But then Damon Hill, I think, had to retire. So Schumacher won the world championship anyway, even though he basically, knocked his competitor off the road. So that was the thing. That was obviously when he was back in his Benetton days there, and he won 94, 95. And you could tell even then he was just like, this guy, he probably doesn't have a lot of friends, but he is so talented as a driver. I mean, it even stood out to someone who, I was still a novice sort of fan of understanding the sport at the time, but you could just see his ability to control his car and to overtake and to go into those turns and things like that. He was just better than the other guys. And I mean, I know he and Senna, they had a big rivalry. The Schumacher documentary actually is really good about pointing that out, how, Senna was the sort of, he was the glamour boy of the races of the circuit. And then Schumacher comes along and is basically, the young star who's sort of arrogant. And as they could tell immediately how good he was, but he also didn't really show all that much respect to the older guys. Instead, he was just like, I'm about winning and I'm going to do that. And he was able to do that with Benetton. And then, of course, he goes to Ferrari, and it took him a lot of years, relatively speaking, to become successful there. So, but, he was great for the sport, I think. I think he really did bring that, keep that sort of reputation of a big name person, in the sport, and keep people interested in it.
Yeah, honestly, as a kid growing up in the U.S. in a family that wasn't that into motorsports, honestly, we were an NBA family. Oddly enough, how I think we all ended up becoming buddies. But I think Michael Schumacher might have been the only name I would have known as a kid. I think that's the only person who, if you would ask me, like, who's an F1 driver, it's the only thing I could have told you. It's like,
not even Senna?
Maybe. I think I knew. I mean, I knew who that was. This is Amelie aware, but I mean, I growing up in the '90s, though, Senna was already kind of, he passed away during that time, but Schumacher dominated the time, which was my teens and things like that, right? So that's what I was probably would have been more sports aware, generally,
right?
So so.
Well, you said it took Michael Schumacher a little bit of time to become a winner as a driver, but Leigh, you were a winner in your very first appearance on No Brakes. We're going to take a little break here, and when we come back, we'll break down the Australian Grand Prix and hand out some awards. Stick around.
If you're a small business owner and you're juggling 100 balls in the air, you haven't got time to interview candidates who just aren't qualified for roles you have open. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier for you to find the people you want to interview faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. Then add your job and the purple #hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring, so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and potentially hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/nodunks. That's linkedin.com/nodunks to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Leigh, they're wondering in the stream team if the Lakers are going to use LinkedIn for their head coach.
Wow, how would they post that? Wanted head coach. Previous,
yeah, probably. That's exactly how you would do it.
Previous experience preferred, not necessarily required though, because you could maybe take a flyer on someone, I suppose.
Sure. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn how to skateboard from Tony Hawk, improve your barbecue skills from Aaron Franklin, or learn wilderness survival from Jesse Krebs. With over 100 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. And in fact, I consider myself a bit of a super masterclass pupil. So what I've done is taught myself all 3 of those at once. And I'm going to be putting them into practice shortly. So next week, I will attempt to skateboard through the unknown woods while simultaneously using a map and a brisket as a compass. Again, this type of master classing only for the advanced. So you stick to one class at a time. You leave the ollie flipping ribs to your boy Skeetsy, okay? Masterclass is super easy to use, though. You can access the material on your laptop, your phone, your TV. And with the new audio mode, you can even listen in your car or while traveling. Not that I would know. I only skateboard everywhere now, Hawk style. But if you have a car, you can listen to it. I highly recommend you check it out. Get unlimited access to every masterclass. And as a No Dunks listener, you get 15% off an annual membership. Go to masterclass.com/nodunks today. That's masterclass.com/nodunks. Terms apply.
If you can't wait for playoff basketball, the best way to watch is with Sling TV. Get every playoff game for the best price, hands down. Sling is the MVP for all your favorite live sports, news, and entertainment, and you'll never get locked into a long-term contract. While the other guys charge you more for less, with Sling, you can watch all the sports you love, including every playoff basketball game, for the best price. Customize your channel lineup with all-star channels like TNT, TBS, True TV, ESPN, USA Network, and more. Plus, you can stream the games anywhere, so you never miss another play. Watch on your favorite devices, including your phone, computer, tablet, and smart TV. You can also watch anytime you want, with 50 hours of DVR storage included. Sling is easy to set up and easy to use, so check out sling.com for special offers today. Be confident you're getting all the playoff basketball you love for a price you love with Sling. So check out sling.com for special offers.
Back with no breaks. Not the most exciting race we've had this season, but there's still a lot to talk about from the Australian Grand Prix, starting with the podium. For the second time in 3 races, Charles Leclerc in his Ferrari takes home P1, followed by Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, and George Russell getting his first earned podium, you would say, for Mercedes there in P3. See the rest of the points finishers: Hamilton, Norris, Ricciardo, Ocon, Bottas, Gasly, and Alex Albon taking home 10th in the Williams there. Graydon, okay, race. A lot of interesting stuff happened. Maybe not quite as competitive as the first 2 we saw, but what was your big takeaway from the Australian Grand Prix?
So I think the big takeaway has to be is that Ferrari is more than back. They are the clear front runner. You know, Charles Leclerc is now over 25 points clear of, the next closest person in the championship, which is, as it turns out, George Russell, oddly enough, who isn't really seriously considered a contender. The car looked unbeatable on Sunday, and the reality is that that was shown by the fact that he took pole, had fastest lap, led every lap of the race, and won the race. It was a grand slam, a dominant victory. He is clearly the favorite to now win the title. But I think the other big takeaway is that so much of the rest of the field is as uncertain as it's ever been. Red Bull clearly has the second fastest or roughly equivalently fast car, depending upon the track, but they've been very self-defeating so far this year with, of the 6 times they've had across 3 races to bring a car across the finish line, they've only done so 3 times. And Mercedes is still, leading them in the championship fight because of that for second. And the midfield is a mess. People are all over McLaren had a terrific race. Some other people who had looked strong, like Alpine, probably didn't end up with as strong a result as they had originally hoped for. But even though the car looks fast, it's a super dynamic midfield. And I think it's right now, it's as unclear as it's ever been how the standings are going to shake out at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. The only thing that feels settled right now is that Leclerc feels like almost a guarantee to win the title at this point. Feels like the new Lewis Hamilton out there, like a 20-second victory. There was, I guess maybe the second restart, he was a little slow, and Verstappen was pulling his classic move where he gets right up next to him. Tense moments there, but Leclerc ends up running away. And even his teammate, Carlos Sainz, maybe he's the new Bottas, not a great showing from Sainz early in the season. We thought after the first race in Bahrain, we're like, man, he's being too hard on himself, talking about how poorly he handled the car. he's been severely behind Leclerc to start the Grand Prix season here for sure. But Leclerc looks like not only does he have the best car, he looks like he might be the best driver in this new set of regulations as well. Leigh, what kind of takeaway did you take from what I'm guessing maybe your first full race of the season?
Yeah, I think, it's always funny to me that race to the first turn can have such an impact on the rest of the race. If you're leading after that first turn, then you can kind of run out the clock. And that's what Leclerc did in this one. But I think added to that, the fact that Verstappen didn't finish again. I mean, that's just huge in Formula One, because to keep up the race points, you've just got to finish. And that's 2 races out of 3 now that he hasn't finished. And that's huge. And because you guys, you're talking here with 3 races in and Leclerc is the clear favorite to win it. You kind of don't want it to be that sort of that clear. You want it to be more open, where it's like, because if he doesn't finish a race and then Verstappen, wins the next race, then things can liven up again quickly. But I know they've continued to sort of change the point system to try to make it so that it isn't such a done deal too early on. Because again, I know that was one of the problems with Michael Schumacher. He often would wrap up the championship so early into the season. So, but it's good to see, I think, for the whole fixture to have Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton struggling early on, because you expect these guys are going to be better. The thing with Verstappen, it was more a team issue rather than necessarily a driver at fault there. And they've sort of talked about, I saw them speaking after the race saying they've got to be better. They've got to fix that. They can't afford to fall behind here too early on. So I think it's good. I mean, the Ferrari, obviously they want to get back and start winning again, because that's what they did for so long under Schumacher, and they just haven't had that dominant race driver for so long. And now they have a guy who looks like he's going to be pretty good there in Leclerc.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Lee. I don't want to say that, it's not as if the season's over or anything like that. You're 100% right. A DNF from Leclerc, he puts in a wall, he makes a mistake, and then a race win by Verstappen, and everything's right back in the mix, right? This is the longest season in F1 history, with more points out there to be scored than at any other point in F1 history. A lot can still happen. I just think at this point, you're clearly seeing that there's the reliability issues on the Red Bull appear to be real. Meanwhile, the Ferrari looks so balanced, so drivable. And Leclerc has taken a leap here, right? He looks like kind of Leclerc 2.0, right? He looks calm, confident, collected, able to handle the pressure. He's perfectly striking that balance of when to push and when to be conservative. His just race day management is exceptional. He is on another level right now. So it does feel like he is in the driver's seat, I guess, literally and figuratively. It's his to win if he can keep it up. But I do think you're right. The long season, it's a big opportunity for teams to fix things. You mentioned Mercedes. It's a great point. I do believe that if anybody could solve their issues with their car and get back to the top step within a single season, it is Mercedes. They have the capability at Brackley to do that. So you have to wonder, later in the season, are they meaningfully challenging for winning races? It's probably too late to fight for the title at that point, but it might not be too late to ruin someone else's chance at a title.
Right.
If Verstappen is needing to play catch up, but now it's Lewis or George on the top step, that's probably taking away precious points that Red Bull might need if they get down early. So
yeah, I think there's a 36-point gap right now from Leclerc to Verstappen, and they kept saying on the broadcast, no champion has overcome that big of a deficit to go on and win the title, but we got more races. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Another thing they kept mentioning, Graydon, that it was such a huge advantage for Ferrari to basically say, hey, we're not winning the title in 2021, whereas Mercedes and Red Bull were obviously going down to the last lap of the last race trying to win Verstappen his first title, trying to get Lewis Hamilton his 8th title. Is that a huge advantage for Ferrari to say, rebuilding year, we're building a perfect car for 2022, and that's all they've been focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly been massive for them, right? The benefits are huge. The biggest loser in that is really Mercedes, who, if you look at last season, clearly started with the second fastest car and fought its way back to have the fastest car. Clearly, a disproportionate amount of their engineering energy was focused on winning last year, and that has hurt them this year. But similarly with Red Bull, they had to continue to divide their attention, whereas Ferrari did not, and that's playing right into Ferrari's hands. That's partly just kind of a where you direct your energy, but there's some literal rules built into that as well, right? You know, there's literally more time is allotted in the wind tunnel to teams that are further down the standings. So it's not just that Ferrari, you know, was lower last year, but they were sixth the preceding year. So that was even more time to better understand the upcoming regulations, even more time to prepare for 2022 and put them into position, you know, to be winning races by 20 seconds, you know, as they are this past weekend.
Yeah, they're looking really good, looking unbeatable right now, at least Leclerc. Leigh, what was your favorite moment from this weekend? What was the best moment, whichever way you want to take it?
It's a good question. I mean, you know, recapping a race is not like recapping a basketball game where you can sort of, you know, in the third quarter, you know, someone had 20 points, you know, and caught fire. I guess, you know, I guess what I take away from this, and I saw all the drivers' interviews afterwards, and Lewis Hamilton, you know, 7-time champion, you know, but coming into this season, remember he talked about maybe he was going to walk away from it. He didn't like how last season ended, and he just didn't seem all that bothered to me that the team is what they finished 4th, I think it was. He just doesn't seem all that sort of, he doesn't have that competitive drive that he's had in the past, which I think could be key as well here, because, you know, 7 times world champion, he wants to get 8. Schumacher is a 7-time world champion. He wants to beat that record, but you just wonder if he is still as motivated as he has been in the past. And he seems to be as well, talking about, you know, his car. Hey, we've got to be better. We've got to be strong. We've got to correct these issues here. But you just wonder if he is actually as focused and dedicated as he may have been in years gone by. And that really can open the door up for the guys who haven't won it before and have a chance, because you haven't got the best driver competing against you. It just makes it stronger. So it doesn't really answer your question as far as the best moment, but I just thought that was maybe a significant moment to gain out of the race, that Lewis is perhaps, you know, perhaps he's, you know, like Kobe was in those last couple of seasons there. You know, he's still a good driver, but he just
wants to get 50 shots up.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's just, I mean, he's won everything. He's achieved everything. And maybe that hunger isn't where it has been in years gone by.
Yeah, he mentioned late in the race, he's like, you guys put me in a bad position. And he kind of did get a little screwed with regards to how the safety cars went down. But my favorite moments of this race were probably Checo versus Lewis early on. Hamilton has a great start. He zooms up to P3. Like, Verstappen kind of boxes Perez out of the way on the start here, gives Hamilton a chance to get up into P3. They eventually... Perez eventually passes Hamilton back on lap 10. Perez pits earlier than Hamilton. We got the overcut Graydon. I was loving hearing that. Then we had a nice battle once they're both out of the pits. Perez passes Hamilton to get into P5. Hamilton tries to get back into P5, but then Sebastian Vettel spins out on lap 23, becomes a safety car, which was perfectly timed for George Russell, who must have just been like right by the pit entry. As soon as they called the safety car, he like dipped in. He comes out, and basically that was Lewis's race was over. His ended his chance at the podium, but that was some pretty solid racing between Lewis and Checo, and a nice start by Lewis. But I'm kind of with you, Leigh. It feels like Russell has outperformed Lewis Hamilton, which is certainly a shock to me. Are you surprised by that at all, Graydon?
I think, you know, it's a little bit shocking. I think everybody says it's, you know, they expected Russell to outperform him. Is, I don't know, probably a little bit of hindsight there. I expected Russell to be very competitive. He certainly is very hungry. To, you know, to Leigh's point, there's no question about how locked in and focused Russell is about this opportunity. Yeah, I do think over the course of the season, we'll see whether that maintains. Lewis is such a supreme talent, and I think Russell got, I don't want to discredit what he achieved. He got a little lucky in Jeddah, which is that Mercedes was in such bad shape that they decided to kind of A/B test the setups and send them in both just radically different directions. And it happened to be that Russell's setup was significantly better. So that's not to say that he didn't drive a solid race or do well in qualifying there. You know, he's the guy behind the wheel, but Lewis got distinctly unlucky in that instance, I think. So this is the second race in a row where I think Lewis has gotten actually unlucky as opposed to things kind of sliding Russell's way. But at the same time, I mean, I think given the reality is the Mercedes looks slow. It is way off the pace, not anywhere close to what Red Bull or Ferrari are doing. And honestly, even at times looks like the Alpine could be faster than the Mercedes, which, Alpine is a team that's getting really unlucky so far right now, but they might not even have the third fastest car on the grid, and yet they're second in the championship. Russell is second in the drivers' championship. Sure, there's a little bit of luck involved there, but that's a little bit of making your own luck too. That's a little bit of like being in the position to take advantage when other things go wrong for other teams. That's what Mercedes has always been excellent at, and they're continuing to do well this year, even as they struggle in other areas.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that Mercedes said, at least after Bahrain, that Imola was kind of when they were going to be targeting getting their upgrades. And their car has looked better since the first weekend of the season. So we'll see if they're able to put anything together as we continue on through the year. Here's another great moment from the Aussie GP. This was during qualifying. They cut to this kid wearing a Chicago Bulls hat in Australia. I mean, this kid is like maybe 10 years old.
Yeah.
The Bulls have been pretty bad for the entirety of this kid's life, but I love to still see it down under. Go Bulls, go Bulls, go Bulls.
Well, just ask Nick Friedel about when he went out to Australia for vacation. He said he was inundated by fans of the Chicago Bulls. This is when he used to cover the Bulls. So yeah, the Bulls have got a huge following in Australia. It's a bit like Ferrari. Again, when we first got the Grand Prix in Melbourne, any Melburnian had the most minute link to anything in Italy, all of a sudden everyone's the biggest Ferrari fan you could possibly be.
Where's the Spurs gear? I thought, what about all those loyal years from Paddy? We can't get any love. Can't get any love from my Spurs down there.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, Jock Landale's there as well right now. Aaron Baines in the past. Shane Heel, Brett Brown. I mean, everyone's been there.
We're basically an Australian satellite country down in San Antonio.
Absolutely, yeah.
How about surprising and disappointing, Graydon? What surprised you? What disappointed you from the weekend?
Okay, so surprise, on a positive standpoint. Well, the number one surprise has got to be McLaren and how well they did. I mean, they looked really competitive in qualifying, and that was, that came out of nowhere, at least on my end. And then that pace held up reasonably well in the race, so they were able to maintain that. I think, Lando lost a spot or two compared to where he started, qualifying fourth, I believe. But that was a great comeback from McLaren. I think bodes really well for their ability to solve the porpoising issues and get back in the hunt for the top of the midfield over the course of the rest of the season. The other surprise that I thought was honestly excellent was Albon and Williams getting in the points at all. The car has looked just incredibly uncompetitive, like a true back marker. And by taking a really radical strategy, they of basically not pitting. I mean, pitting on the last lap. Yeah, it was awesome. they were able to get into the points, which was terrific. That was a bold idea, and they needed something bold to overcome what are huge gaps between their car and the rest of the field. On the disappointing side, I mean, I wouldn't call it. I wouldn't know if I'd call it surprising at this point, but easily the most disappointing is Aston Martin. It is a mess right now. They were a mess in qualifying, barely got the cars onto the track in qualifying. Vettel wouldn't have even participated in qualifying if he hadn't gotten lucky with a wreck from Latifi, I believe, right? And then similarly, during the race, wrecking again, things are going from bad to worse for them week after week. This looks like a team that is completely listless right now after only a couple of years ago, apparently being one of the ascendant teams that was talking about trying to compete for a title within this time frame. Now they're just competing to not be last on the grid. That's a huge mess for Aston Martin. And, something you're going to be hugely frustrated if you're Sebastian Vettel, that's where you landed, and that's how your season's going so far.
Yeah, it's not good when the scooter that takes people away from the crash gets nicknamed after one of your drivers. But I think the final stats for Aston Martin on the weekend were that they had a power unit change, 4 crashes, multiple trips to the stewards, and a fire in the pit lane. Other than that, things went perfectly for Aston Martin. But it is weird, Graydon. It's like they ripped off Mercedes design a couple of seasons back. They had the pink Mercedes. It worked perfectly. They changed the floor rake regulations. Mercedes was able to figure it out. Aston Martin was not. And now they're like one of the worst teams out there. So it's definitely been a bit of a bummer season for Aston Martin because I thought they were just going to be better with, bringing Vettel over. I thought Stroll was maybe not a good driver, but not a outrageously bad driver. It seems like they should be a little bit at least competing with Alpine, Alfa Romeo, the teams that are kind of just in the middle there rather than dragging in the back.
But they've looked at the Alpine, Alfa Romeo, and AlphaTauri, the other A's, of the grid, inarguably look better, right? They're out there competing for points week in, week out. It's not completely implausible that one of those teams you just named ends up on a podium at some point. A lot of other things got to go wrong for some true contenders, but that sort of stuff happens. Right now, Aston Martin just being in the points whatsoever is going to be a huge victory for them if they can just score some championship points on any given weekend. So,
anything surprising or disappointing for you, Leigh?
Well, Sebastian Vettel, he's only 34, but he won 3-4 championships, a decade ago, and it looked like it was him and Lewis Hamilton were really going to compete for, supremacy, but he hasn't been close, and now he is here at Aston Martin, and to not finish, to crash out. Again, it's just so important to just get across the line and pick up any point you can. So for these sort of teams that are desperate for any sort of, rising up the standings, they just got to be able to get over the line. So it's just got to be so deflating for everybody on that team to just say, hey, we crashed out again. You can't afford to do that when you've got a driver of his experience and his expertise there. So I would say, outside of Verstappen, obviously not finishing the race at all, that for Aston Martin and Vettel, it's just another blow and another setback for a guy who, has had such promise and success throughout his career.
Yeah, that was a disappointment. Sainz had a bad GP, like we've talked about, and I think Alonso kind of got unlucky. They pitted him pretty late. They put on the medium tires, and instantly they started graining to the point where he just was dropping down the grid, and they put on a different pair of tires so we could at least try and have one fast lap out there. That was a bummer because I think Alonso and Ocon have both had really solid seasons for Alpine, but just little tiny reliability things have been killing Alpine so far.
Yeah, Alonso looks fantastic. Honestly, the car did look really sharp. He looked great in qualifying, on the lap where things went awry for him and he ended up not finishing in Q3. I mean, he looked very fast. I think in general, that looks like a car that could absolutely be competing with Mercedes for those, third, fourth, fifth, sixth spots in any given race. I mean, even Ocon after the race finishing 7th, I believe, in this best race, he was upset. He was like, oh, I really underperformed. Their expectations have completely changed for where they want to end up on any given week. So so that's something. So, I mean, that's awesome to see. You're also right that Sainz he's probably actually the biggest disappointment of the weekend, which is that if he gets a little unlucky in qualifying, right, with the red flag ruining his lap, but he had a terrible start and then ends up going out on the first lap. If he can really just keep it on the course, the way the Ferrari looked, he probably is cruising to a podium. He probably would. He would have crushed any other car out there if he can just keep it on the track. So the fact that he ended up in the gravel absolutely cost him a podium and probably points, despite the fact that he started 9th. He would have come back, I suspect. So
could have been better. And it's been kind of strange because last year and even coming into this season, Graydon, I remember we were just saying that Sainz is very steady and he doesn't make a whole bunch of mistakes. And it feels like he's just been kind of riddled with tiny little mistakes that are making a big difference so far early in the season. But our final category, it used to be driver of the day. It's been rebranded here. We're calling it the Full Beans driver of the week for the driver who went all out during the weekend. Graydon, who are you giving your beans?
Okay, I've thought hard about who gets this week's can of beans.
Oh my god!
And I thought about
a real can of beans.
I thought about who's deserving of the whole can of beans because they went full beans. The obvious choice here is Charles Leclerc, who had the Grand Slam. And of course, is my guy whom I love. And, he this race. But I'm going to actually go with Alex Albon here. The fact that Albon basically was going to could have driven the whole race on one set of tires was awesome. Not just that, but the fact that, when he was on 55, 50 plus, old hard tires, and he was right there competitive with those other guys in the midfield, setting great lap times, just a few seconds behind, Danny Rick, putting out lap times that were equivalent to his. I thought that was awesome driving on a completely depleted set of tires. That is really great stuff. That's the stuff that we've always wanted to see from Albon, the sort of talent that people have always believed was there. And if he can just get the confidence back, it's why people believe he can be competitive in this sport. So that's why our first weekly, full beans award goes to Alex Albon. So.
Yeah, he certainly deserved the beans, and I'm really happy that he was able to still get 1 point out of the race, because he pitted there on the last lap, could have very easily fallen down into P11. I think it was Zhou Guanyu that was trying to chase him down, but he held him off, took home the 1 point for Williams, and taking home Graydon's entire can of black beans. What about you, Leigh? Giving anybody some beans this weekend?
Get ready to play the homer card here, Trey, because Daniel Ricciardo coming in sixth has been a bit of a rough start. A bit of a rough start, of course, there for him. And they finished fifth and sixth, his team. So he was pretty happy with that. And also I read that, coming into this Grand Prix, apparently he was a part of the sort of consultation as to how to improve the track, make it a little bit more competitive, make it so there can be a little bit more action, because that's been one of the critiques of the Melbourne Grand Prix in the past. There's not a lot of stuff going on. So, tighten up a few corners here, stretch it out a little bit there, try to encourage a bit more overtaking. And apparently, he was asked to sort of give his input there. And so he gets a nice sixth place finish there. I think that's home track advantage, isn't it, really? I mean, you'd like to see him on the podium, of course.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pressure on the Australian drivers. Mark Webber was the same when he was there driving, because Australians are desperate to have, someone at least competing and close. And if they can win a championship, you would be the most loved bogan in Australian history if you could win a Formula One crown. And, he's not going to win it this year, unfortunately. But at least some positive signs here early. So I'll just give it to Daniel Ricciardo. Why not?
Yeah, may not have won, but he is taking home the beans, which is like a solid second place.
Yeah.
If you can't actually win the race, at least you're getting the beans. Graydon, what did you think about the updates to the track?
I mean, honestly, I thought the track was great. I mean, I thought they made the right move removing the fourth DRS zone that they were originally planning on having. I thought that was probably one too many, but I thought the racing was good aside from at the very front of the race. I think that the fact that Charles just blew the rest of the field away actually took away from the fact that between 7 and 12 in there was lots of really competitive racing going on. Great action between Bottas and Gasly and Stroll and a bunch of other guys in there, right? So I thought the track looked great, and I thought I'm glad that we're back, because this is a favorite race of mine, despite the fact that it's perhaps the race that's on at the most inconvenient time for us here in the States. It is an awesome one, and we had a couple of years off because of COVID, so it's so great to be back down in Australia and back racing there.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It was a good race, except for who's going to win, because that was kind of decided pretty easily. As for my full beans of the weekend, I got to go with Lance Stroll. I'm giving him all the beans. He had the crash with Latifi in qualifying, which was just very strange to me, that Latifi was like, all right, come on through. And then as soon as he was through, Latifi tried to get back through again. I didn't understand that. Who was at fault there, Graydon? Was that Lance Stroll's fault? But I guess in the end, Latifi lets him through. Why is he going straight? I was kind of with Lance on that one, believe it or not. If you let me through, I'm not assuming that I've got to let you through back again. That was strange to me, but Stroll continued being hilarious in the Grand Prix. After the second restart, I loved the moment when he was basically just holding up the DRS train. He pushed Bottas wide at one point, didn't get a penalty for that, but then did get a penalty for like the very next straight, weaving back and forth so nobody would pass him. They all eventually passed him. He got a 5-second penalty, ended up P12, but full beans as far as I'm
He
concerned.
probably should have gotten a penalty for that Bottas one, by the way. I thought he definitely drove him off the track. I thought he definitely drove him off the track. But,
Yeah, but we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments, who is your full beans driver of the weekend, the driver who went all out. That's all I've got from the Australian Grand Prix. You guys got anything else from the weekend?
Great to have it back, because it's been a couple of years since they've had the Grand Prix, and it used to be the first race of the season. I'm not sure if they will get back to that because, again, that was always a good thing to start the season off there in Melbourne. But just happy it's back. The crowds were there. People, I think, were just dying to get out and support it again because it has been so long. And it was fun. I mean, it's, again, for me, seeing it there in Melbourne, Trey, you know what I'm like. I'm like, yep, I'll take full credit for anything that does do well in Melbourne. So it was good stuff.
Yeah, it was really fun, and it was really fun to have Leigh on the podcast. We're going to take one more break. When we get back, we'll talk about the next race on the Formula One schedule. Stick around.
One of the best things about Peloton is that they use real music in all of their workouts. We were just talking about jock jams here on No Dunks, and Peloton just recorded a series with them. I was doing a 15-minute workout that started with, "Oh, you're unbelievable!" Yeah, try not working out to that song. Then I got into the Tootsie Roll. Let me see that Tootsie Roll. Hip Hop Hooray. Push it. Whoop, there it is. What a workout, instructed by Jess Sims. Then I went on a run in Iceland with Jess Sims. Volcanoes everywhere. Then I went on a jog with Selena Samuela in New Mexico. Leah, like this, pine nuts were falling from the trees as we jogged, and she told everyone her mom makes pesto with those nuts. Collects them, grinds them, makes some nuts. Like many of you out there, I don't love working out, but Peloton has enough different features to keep me interested and motivated, and they're timely. I did a workout this morning that was recorded this morning. It just keeps it fresh, keeps me in the loop. I was also just at Disney, and Peloton has a travel series designed for when you're on the road. I was doing some plank up downs, hands, elbows, and Danielle came by and said, "Oh, you're getting pretty close to that disgusting carpet. Hope you don't catch something." And I said, "You pick this hotel. I just brought the Peloton." If you want to check it out, there is a No Dunks hashtag on there. Visit onepeloton.com to learn more. That's ONEPELOTON.com.
Yeah, so I just got back from Aruba last night. Loved it. You know what else I love? Coming home to my own bed, especially when that mattress is a beautiful Helix. Because as much fun as we had on the island, nighttime, not as much fun because you're sleeping on an Airbnb bed. It's fine, just wasn't my Helix. And on previous trips, I've actually taken my own bed pillow with me because it's just the one I like. I hate it when you go to a hotel and you're like, too heavy, too thick, too thin, whatever. So I take my own pillow. Trying to figure out a way now. Tass took his Peloton to Orlando. I wonder if I can somehow ship my Helix mattress on my next
Your
trip.
whole bed?
Yeah. I mean, why not? Why not? But it is so good. And the reason I think I like it so much is because when I chose it, I ordered the right one online, and it's so easy to do. So, you fill out all your preferences there, and you get the right mattress based on your preferences. We went with the Dusk Luxe mattress, which is medium firmness, good for both back and stomach sleepers, which covers mine and my wife's preferences. She prefers to sleep on her back. I'm a sort of side stomach guy, so works for both of us. And that quiz I was talking about takes just 2 minutes to complete, matches your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you and your partner. With Helix, you're getting a mattress that will be perfect for the way that you both sleep. Everybody's unique, and Helix knows that, so they have several different mattress models to choose from. You've got your soft, your medium, your firm mattresses. Mattresses great for cooling you down if you sleep hot. Mattresses great for spinal alignment to prevent morning aches and pains, and even a Helix Plus mattress for those plus-size sleepers. So if you're looking for a mattress, you take the quiz, you order the mattress that you match to, and it comes right to your door, shipped for free. You don't need to go to a mattress store again. Just go to helixsleep.com/nodunks, take the 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a customized mattress. And Helix, it's awesome. Now, if you don't believe me, you don't take my word for it, but if my word does carry any weight with you, then you can trust what I'm saying, because I do sleep on one every single night, and it's awesome. And we're actually thinking about getting another one for our child because he's due for a new mattress. And I'm thinking, why not go with a Helix? I mean, it works for us.
You spoil that child.
Oh, why not? Why not? But so you're not really spoiling them because it's not like you're going out there and splashing a fortune. They're very well-priced mattresses for what you're getting. Helix was awarded #1 Best Overall Mattress Pick of 2020 by GQ and Wired magazines, and has been recommended by multiple leading chiropractors and doctors of sleep medicine as a go-to solution for improving sleep. Now, the best part for me, 10-year warranty, and you get to try this baby out for 100 nights. That's over 3 months of sleeping risk-free. If you don't love it, they'll come and pick it up for you free of charge. But how strong does a company stand behind its product to say, here's a custom mattress made for you, you get it for 100 nights risk-free, and we guarantee it's good for 10 years. So if you work that out, 8 hours a night for 10 years on that bed, that's a lot of hours right there. About 29,000 if you ask me. Anyway, Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/nodunks. Tell them the Big E sent you.
Back with the breaks, boys. Going to take a quick look at the drivers and constructors standings here. You see the drivers standings. We've got Leclerc on top with a commanding lead. In P2 right now, George Russell, followed by Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Kevin Magnussen, and Valtteri Bottas. The team constructor standings, Ferrari out to a dominating lead early. Mercedes in second, followed by Red Bull, McLaren, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, Williams with 1 point, and nothing for Aston Martin yet this season. Unfortunately, our next race on the docket is the Imola Grand Prix in a couple of weekends. Practice and fake qualifying take place on Friday, April 22nd. We've got our first sprint race qualifying of the year on Saturday, the 23rd. Then we've got the race on Sunday, April 24th. Last year's podium, Verstappen, Hamilton, Norris, Graydon. Who's this track favor?
This is an interesting one. I think there's an argument in favor of Red Bull and Ferrari at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, which is that, I think it's a very old school track, right? Fast corners, wide open, a lot of flat out sections, a classic F1 track in that way, which probably favors Red Bull, as we've seen a terrific speed in the straights and them being superior in high speed corners, areas like that. So I think there's an argument for, although at the same time, you could make a case that Australia shows that Ferrari has made up a lot of that gap. Maybe not the true speed on the straights, but a lot of the high speed corner stuff. So it's tough to say that's where it maybe swings to favoring Ferrari, is that they're going to have a lot less time to figure out the car. With sprint qualifying, what you lose is an additional practice session. And the setup that you show up with is going to be much more indicative of the setup that you run with once you enter Parc Fermé and that you're running on race day. So it's a lot less time to figure out the car. And you would argue right now that Ferrari has their own car way more figured out than anybody else. So it's probably...
Yep.
This is a disadvantage to the teams that are still doing a lot of testing, a lot of tinkering, that are asking a lot of questions about their vehicle, and is a huge benefit to teams like Ferrari, where they're feeling very confident about the setup. So that's probably where I think there's an argument for either. I'd probably give the slight edge to Ferrari after this past weekend. So.
Well, I'm personally giving the edge to Ferrari because I saw the track is named after Ferrari. So... probably a good sign there. Lee, you think you'll watch this race?
Like getting back into it this week, it did sort of relight that spark that I used to have, because when I lived in England, it was great to follow it because so many races happen. You talk about this race in Melbourne, not a great time for a North American audience, of course. But when you live in Europe, I mean, every Sunday it felt like in summer there was a new race somewhere. So you get back into it. And Imola is obviously, historically a very significant track for not good reasons, but it is good to sort of get back. I know Ferrari, like obviously this track is close to home there in San Marino, and so that to them is going to feel like they have some home track advantage here, home circuit advantage. So I will try. I mean, like I say, I always liked Formula One. It's just life sort of makes it a little harder to keep up with it these days, being in North America. But I can see me dipping in and out a little bit again, and following along.
Are we
I
gonna?
hope so. I love chatting with you.
Are we getting some Leigh Ellis at the annual Gordian Monaco Grand Prix brunch?
Oh,
The whole brunch. I mean,
when's
I
that?
would love to see it. I don't know when's Monaco. It's up in May.
Usually June. I think
it's
it's usually sort of
May or June. When is it? It's actually the same weekend as the Indianapolis 500. I think almost.
Yeah.
Hold on a second here. Looking up May 27th through 29th is
my
Put
birthday.
it on your calendar, Lee.
Wow.
We'll have bagels.
I might have to.
We'll have pumpernickel toast.
Wow.
Pumpernickel toast on the docket. I'll never forget last year's Monaco Grand Prix when I sliced my thumb off. Still can't feel the tip of it. Graydon, you think we'll get anything different in the sprint races this season with the changes to regulations in the cars? Last year, I feel like we had one good sprint race. Maybe it was Silverstone, where Hamilton had to start in the back and he kind of clawed his way to the forefront of that race before ultimately winning it on Sunday. But in general, it seemed like kind of like 5 cool laps and then kind of everybody settled into, we don't want to ruin our cars for the real race.
Yeah, the Brazil sprint race last year was probably the best of them, right? But but that was probably the most notable one. But I think that this is, in theory, you will see better racing out there. I think that you will see people able to follow more closely. You'll see instances of overtaking with DRS being less dictatorial of positioning. People will be able to fight back. I think a big question, if you're talking about, the starting, on the front row, I think a big question will be, is the faster car actually the car in the lead out of turn 1, right? If that's the case, then it's probably a done deal as far as P1 for the actual race itself. But that's not always the case. And sometimes you've got the faster car fighting from behind, and with guys with the racecraft of both Leclerc and Verstappen, even if one of them finds himself in the slower car, it's not a sure thing they'll give up the spot. So that's, if from a race fan standpoint, you're actually probably hoping that somebody sneaks in to that starting spot for sprint qualifying, even though they were in the slower car, truly, and that it ends up creating a little bit of drama there. So we'll see.
Only time will tell. I always get excited when it's a sprint race just because something crazy could happen. And maybe this year it will, but that's not this weekend. That is next weekend. Also got a teensy tiny bit of news. The Las Vegas Grand Prix was officially announced recently for the 2023 F1 season. It's going to be on Thanksgiving weekend. It's going to be a night race, and it is going down the strip, which looks like it's going to be really cool. If you could somehow end up atop of the Paris, the Eiffel Tower, it'd be a great spot to watch it. Got a question for you though, Leigh. If you're going to Las Vegas, would you rather go in June and July for 2 weeks of Summer League or over the entirety of the Thanksgiving weekend?
Well, I'll take the weekend because it's only 3 or 4 nights max.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
I was just trying to think like how crazy it will be there, but I swear, man, those first 3 years we did 2 full weeks in Vegas for Summer League.
Long.
Yeah, even for basketball sickos like us, we're watching shit basketball, and it's like day 7, and you're just like, oh my god, they're having a playoff for 7th and 8th at Summer League. Like these guys we've never even heard of, they're never going to hang on into the league. So I'm excited. I think what we were talking about earlier. I think the actual strip will be an awesome background there for a Formula One race. So I'm definitely.
Okay, which of these hotels, Lee? Which of these hotels are you trying to get a room in to look out on the track? Are you a Bellagio man here, thinking I want to see?
Is that the Cosmo's there? I think, isn't it? It looks like the Cosmo where we have stayed a couple of times.
Yeah,
I think is there if I'm looking at the right one. But yeah, one of those up the top, down the bottom there, around turn 8 and 9. I think if you could get up there, you could maybe really get to see. A panoramic view if you're in one of those top rooms, or there's probably some sort of celebration room up there that you could maybe have a party in, and but it'd be great. It's great. I think Vegas is a great tacky place for a Formula One.
Yeah,
everyone,
it is.
everyone can make an excuse to get to Vegas. There's going to be enough room for everyone in the hotels, and great place for it.
There is a video from many years ago where they ask the drivers during like a pre-race interview, like, what's your dream location? And I think Daniel Ricciardo says Las Vegas and Lewis Hamilton says Miami, like back to back, and they both laugh about it. They're like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Like whatever. So now it's come to, so clearly they got their wish here. So.
This is some pretty good advice from Ignatius, who says, don't forget your IV when you're going to Las Vegas. If you ever need to recuperate, Leigh knows a person.
Yeah, that was a $300 hangover. Had a little too much to drink on the first day there in Vegas.
A few too many shoeys.
I don't think I've been that drunk since, and I don't plan on getting that drunk again. But I didn't plan on getting drunk that night, so sometimes it just happens,
Thanksgiving 2023, it's happening again. No breaks on the strip. That's it for us right now, though. Follow Graydon on Twitter at Mr. Gordian. You want to get your follow in today because we got the biggest Spurs game of the season on Wednesday. How you feeling about this play-in game, Graydon?
I'm feeling pretty good, honestly. I feel like the team this is the best I've felt about the Spurs, who love the play-in. They just absolutely love coming, playing one game at the end of the year. I'm very excited. I think they can beat the Pelicans. I think they can win, 2 games in a row. I do think they can get the 8th seed. I think they've played well down the stretch. I'm feeling positive. I'm a believer. I believe.
I like
Do
it.
I actually want them to get the 8th seed? Part of me wants them to just lose and get a better draft pick, honestly.
I think Hollinger said if they get the 8th seed, their pick drops down like 6 slots or something like that.
Part of me doesn't want it.
Maybe the 9th seed is good. We'll just take 9th. Win one of these 2 games, it'll be all good. But follow No Dunks on social media at No Dunks Inc. anywhere and everywhere on the internet. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you want us, you can get us. Send us some F1 emails at nodunks@theathletic.com. Subscribe to The Athletic at theathletic.com/nodunks to get all of our podcasts ad-free. I just listened to the races recap podcast yesterday. Very, very good. But I will say a somewhat different tone than No Breaks. They weren't handing out beans on the race. But maybe sometime in the future. Graydon, you brought the beans. Thank you so much. Leigh, you brought the Magpie scouting report. You're not getting that on any other Formula One podcast. This was a ton of fun. No Dunks is back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern to break down Nets, Cavs, Wolves, Clippers. Speaking of Clipper Bros. Yeah.
You heard it here first. Have a great time. Turn up. Love you guys. Awesome.
Stay speedy out there, people. Vroom, vroom.